Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Thursday, September 9th, and today is our prediction show, but there's a lot going on that we're going to have to talk about before that.
It's such a small part about what this is going to be about.
Yes. Brian Kelly gave a press conference today. There was a lot of news that came out, stuff that we had learned right before as well, and some stuff that had been rumored. I believe it was Tom Loy that recently reported that Blake Fisher was going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. And Brian Kelly confirmed that Blake Fisher is, in fact, going to have surgery on his knee, so he's going to be out for some time. Shane Simon's out for the year. Lawrence Keys, he confirmed the report that we broke last night about him being off the team. They've moved Xavier Watts to Rover. That was not a decision that has been well received by many people. So there's a lot of negativity going on right now, which is very concerning. And there's a lot of problems at certain positions that is a very concerning. And obviously receiver being one, but this is where Clark Lee's mismanagement of linebacker recruiting has certainly come back to haunt them. Now, you can't say, well, you expected 3 guys to be out for the year by the first game of the year, before you get to the second game of the year, but that's why you keep recruiting, because you don't know what's going to happen.
You need depth. I mean, that's the whole point of recruiting. Right. I mean, you don't just recruit starters.
Right.
I mean,
it's like when these players leave, it's like, so what? Be good riddance. Well, you know what? Notre Dame probably could really use Jack Lamb right now. You know what I mean? And
you and I were upset when that happened anyway.
Yeah. So this is a major problem for Notre Dame. This is why you can't whiff on a position group the 2020 recruiting class now has no receivers left. And no linebackers in it, because they whiffed on linebackers in that class. And the only linebackers, 5'11 and a half, 185, 190-pound guy named Xavier Watts. That's not going to be received well. So it's a problem. It's a problem. And you're not even in the second game of the year, and you're seeing that. So, and then here's the other issue. Safety recruiting has been so poor under Terry Joseph that you don't really have any safeties that you can move down to Rover. That's a problem.
Because that's the easy switch, right, is to move a safety to Rover, or bring in an additional safety, or however that you fix the depth chart, right? But that doesn't exist as an option right now, and linebacker is so thin that's not an option right now. So they're pulling from a thin wide receiver room,
right,
and pulling over to the Rover position, which I just don't understand.
Because now the receiving core is your starters, right? You've got Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey, Kevin Austin.
Right.
You've got Joe Wilkins, You've got Joe Wilkins as your fourth. That's basically the rotation, right? I mean,
correct.
Lawrence Keys and Lorenzo Styles were just used to give guys a couple breathers on Sunday night, right? That's your rotation. So it's going to be a short bench again. And then your next 2 receivers are what? Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles, and Jaden Thomas. And then walk-ons. And normally, if it was a normal team, I'd say that's no problem. Those are really talented freshmen. But this is a staff. This is a position coach that has shown he has no ability to develop freshmen.
Correct.
None.
Correct.
So I have no faith that he's going to be able to get those guys ready to go. That's a problem. And you're at a position group where your 2 best players, arguably, are guys that have not been able to stay healthy throughout their entire careers.
Correct. And you can't count on that. I mean, I'm sorry. Neither one of them has had a completely healthy season. And the only time Kevin Austin was healthy was when he wasn't allowed to play.
Yeah.
So he's not playing. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to say healthy when you're not playing. And Braden Lindsey, for as good as he is, he just has a tough time staying healthy. And so you've got zero margin for error right now in the wide receiver room. Look, we all agree that when Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey are healthy, they're great. They're great, and they make this offense great. But if, God forbid, anything happens, it's going to be a scramble. And I'm just not convinced that they're going to be able to withstand an injury to either one of those guys, which unfortunately I feel like is inevitable.
I mean, you're going to have to play a freshman, which, again, for a normal team, that's fine. Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey are top 100 players. Jaden Thomas is a 4-star caliber recruit. But this team hasn't shown the ability to do that. That's the problem.
Right.
So, it's problematic.
Right. I guess my biggest issue is pulling from a position group that's already light You know what I mean? Like that you can't come up with any other options except to pull from a light position group already.
Right.
And
it also tells me that they had no plans for Xavier Watts at wide receiver,
which is ridiculous to be.
You don't move a guy in that situation over to defense. And so basically what they'll probably do is they'll probably move him to rover this year just because they need a body.
Right.
Then try to convince him to play safety next year. So he basically loses a whole year of development at whatever position he's going to play. I can assure you that's not going to be received well.
Right. He's going to leave. I'm sorry.
I don't want to say that. I mean, that's just
that's my speculation. That's Vince's opinion.
Right?
I haven't talked to anybody.
Right,
but if I'm in that position, if it's Vince that's getting jacked around like that, I'm leaving. And that's me. That's my opinion. Right. I just don't like the way this looks. And if I put myself in his shoes, I busted my butt. At one position, I'm not getting any playing time. You're going to move me to another position where I'm probably not going to get a lot of playing time. And then you're probably going to move me to another position where I'm probably not going to get a lot of playing time. Why am I here?
And now's the time he's going to have to make that decision because he's going to have to say, look, I'm going to redshirt this year because last year didn't count for him because of COVID.
Right.
He still has 5 years left. He could basically start over with the new transfer rule.
He can start over right now.
He doesn't have to sit out a year. He can basically start over. He can say, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what Keys did. I'm going to, get my grades where they need to be, and I'm going to transfer somewhere in the spring and a place that wants me. And that's a problem. And I talked to Xavier Bradshaw today. It says he's barely heard from Notre Dame. So it's not like they've got these other guys queued up. He says they have not talked to him about a date for visiting. Now, maybe that changes after today, but
why did something like this have to happen, though? Okay, why does chaos have to ensue for you to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where we're at with all that. I think the Blake Fisher news is obviously big.
Yeah.
I think that Notre Dame has some tough decisions to make, and unfortunately, I think they're just going to kind of plug in the next guy on the depth chart as opposed to thinking very long and hard about, do we need to reshuffle this thing?
Right.
Potentially moving Jarrett Patterson out to left tackle, moving Zeke Correll back to center, maybe moving Christophic back out to tackle, something along those lines. It sounds like they're just going to plug in the next guy and just move on is what it sounds like. But they're going to, and how does that go? Is Carmody going to be able to play that position? Are you going to be able to find out this week if he's capable of it? Next week against Purdue, you will. Against George Karlaftis, you're going to find out if he's able to play tackle.
Sure.
But then you maybe miss a couple weeks of potential development of somebody else at that position. So for a team that's a top 10 team and a team that's got a lot of expectations, things have quickly soured in a couple of areas. There's still a lot to be excited about, but there's a couple of question marks now because of injury, and that's part of the game. And this is why we've always said this is why you have to recruit better. This is why you can't have a two-man class in 2020 because it's Tosh Baker and Michael Carmody. It would have been nice to have maybe Jimmy Chris to choose from. Hey, you know what? You remember that Pete Skoronsky kid that's now a freshman All-American last year at Northwestern that Jeff Quinn didn't think was good enough to be a Notre Dame target until it was too late. They finally got on him late. He went to Northwestern. That might have been a good local player to get. He's from Illinois. There's just been a lot of mistakes on the offensive line from a recruiting standpoint, and they're paying the price now.
Yeah.
Because number one, the fact that you're now in the situation where you're playing Michael Carmody and because you never developed, Andrew Christophic, Quinn Carroll had his injury, but that was 2 years ago now. You haven't been able to develop him. You can't develop Tosh Baker. Those are issues. Those are issues that people a lot of people are unwilling to address, but they have to be addressed because you're starting to see the consequences of that now as guys go down because they don't have, like you talked about Vince, you say, losing Jordan Johnson and Jay Brunell and Kendall Abdul-Rahman, no big deal. Those guys weren't going to play anyway. Well, might be nice to have a couple of those guys now. Maybe you should have handled some of those situations correctly. Maybe you should have, taken more interest in what was going on with Jay Brunell, and maybe you shouldn't have used him as a tackling dummy in practice every day. And maybe you'd have a guy like that. Not that he would start, but he'd give you some more depth, and you'd feel a little bit better about where you're turning to. Maybe you should have done that with Kendall Abdul-Rahman. Maybe you say, hey, look, again, maybe those guys aren't playing right now, but at least gives you more confidence in the depth chart, knowing that, hey, we've got these guys we can go to if we need be. Whereas now it's like, if there's an injury, it's like it's a freshman. Well, what if there's another one? I mean, as we've seen a linebacker, they've had 3 injuries now. If that happens at receiver, you're screwed. You don't have enough bodies. And you can't just say, well, go 12, 13. You just lost your number 3 tight end for 6 to 8 weeks. Right. So you've got 2 tight ends now that aren't true freshmen.
Well,
so it's not.
I'm gonna try to put a little silver lining on it. I'm trying
Please
to.
do, because I'm like, dude.
Head,
I mean, they're 1-0. They're ranked in the top 10. You know, like
in my head, I'm trying to think positive here, right? Because I could very easily go take a trip to negative town, as they say, right? I still think this team can be good. And here's the issue. Okay, I still think everything Notre Dame that we've talked about in the past, I think that's still all out in front of them. I do. The problem is your margin for error just got the air sucked out of it. There's no margin for error right now. And by margin for error, I mean basically injuries. And that's the problem. You can't withstand anything else. Like you've taken all the body shots that you can, self-inflicted or otherwise, and now that's it. That's what you got. You know, you're putting all your chips in the middle, and you're hoping that you don't get a bad flop on the river or whatever the poker terminology is.
Right, exactly.
Where you're at right now.
I don't know what the terminology is, but yes.
Right.
I get what you're saying.
But yeah, the point is, I still think this team can be very good. I do. I really do think that they can be good. But the margin for error is gone.
Right. If they don't have another injury at receiver, the receiving position is going to be fine this year. It's going to be loaded.
Sure.
I mean,
exactly.
it is.
Right.
Because they didn't lose a guy that we thought was going to be one of the top 3, right? You and I have talked about this. We didn't think that Lawrence Keys is going to start this year. We thought he should have played a lot, and they weren't going to do that. And it became very obvious in the last couple of days that they just – what they said all offseason to the players – not to us, to the players.
Right.
We're going to have a depth. We're going to play more guys. That was leading into game week. It was said, hey, you're not going to play much this week.
Right.
And then had the conversations. Well, what's this, that? Yeah. Hey, look, you're not going to play much. I mean, after one game, that was the decision. I mean, I've never heard of anything absurd like that in my life. And then you're like, why is the kid leaving? Well, you just told him he wasn't going to play. Right. And you lied to him for months.
Right.
To keep him here, keep him here, so he didn't leave, and that's it's a mess. So yeah, again, Vince, with the exception of the offensive line, as long as there are no more injuries, they'll be fine.
Right, absolutely.
The problem is that like the offensive line, I'm concerned about because your true freshman was probably your best offensive lineman until he got hurt on Sunday, which says a lot because he was just relying on God-given ability. That wasn't a coaching thing. That was just him being that good.
That was just him being big and strong. And
now he loses out on 6 to 8 weeks of development time.
Right.
That's a problem.
Which, huge problem.
And you're moving a guy that honestly should probably be playing guard to left tackle. That's what you're doing. You're moving him. You're moving Michael Carmody to left tackle. That seems like a problem to me.
Yeah, so you're going to be lucky to get Blake Fisher back for USC, Northwestern, Navy, Virginia. I mean, he's going to miss. What's his conditioning
going to be like? Right, exactly.
And he's going to miss that big stretch where you needed a good offensive line, right? I mean, I don't personally. I mean, maybe he's a fast healer and all that, but to bring him back for North Carolina, and USC and things like that, I think that would be tough. That's going to be a tough entrance back into college football, right? An easier. Well, bring him back against Navy, then Virginia, Georgia Tech.
Hopefully, you can weather that tough storm, right? Man, which, as long as you don't have any more injuries, you can. Yeah. You can weather that tough storm. But we'll have to see. We got a super chat here from Lawrence Adams. Lawrence, thank you very much for the super chat. And Lawrence says this team will still be good. However, the lack of depth will likely get them during the tough 5-game run they have to make in the middle of the schedule. And that's exactly you're absolutely right. The concern that we have is they can't suffer another injury in the linebacker safety.
Correct.
They can't suffer any injuries at receiver.
Right.
That's it just can't happen. You don't have enough. You don't have guys, and you don't have a coach that. I'd say they could sustain another receiver injury if I felt there was a coach in place that could coach up young players. But how much time does Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey have to earn Dell's trust over the next 6 weeks?
So maybe this is a good thing because maybe they're going to have to play, and whether he trusts them or not, I don't think he's going to have a choice.
Right.
And maybe they'll go out and they'll impress and they'll be the guys that this team needs them to be.
Right.
Because his hand is forced.
Right.
Right. That's the only thing I can think of from a positive standpoint for those young guys.
And who's playing receiver next year?
Right.
They better hope they better hope Austin and Lindsey decide to come back for fifth seasons, because otherwise they're playing a bunch of freshmen or sophomores, which again, for a normal team with the talent that those guys have, wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
For this team that does not have a coach that's proven he can develop young players, it's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, and we have a couple comments here, Vince, before we get on track. Want to get the stupid questions out of the way, but is there any chance Keys comes back? No.
I don't think so.
No. That bridge has been not only burned, it had a Tomahawk missile fired from a battle cruiser, blew up. It's done.
Yeah, it's incinerated. There is no bridge left.
They could go back and beg him to come back, and I don't see him coming back.
Right.
Don't see it.
Yeah.
Nope.
I agree. Frustrating. This is 2 straight shows.
Right.
In the last
and here we go. So this is Georgia was stupid then at wide receiver against Clemson. I think they had some walk-ons playing. I think Styles and Colsing and Hang. Georgia scored 3 offensive points against
Correct.
Clemson.
With a really, really good
not
quarterback.
A great example, right?
Right.
Yeah, they scored 3 points. Remember, Georgia's only touchdown came on a pick 6.
Correct.
And not only did they score 3 points, they only threatened like one other time. They had a missed field goal, right? And that was the only other time they really threatened Clemson.
So if anybody's cool with 3 points a game, that's not cool.
And I don't think that's what he's saying. But,
right.
But, yes, look, and what he's saying, I agree with. In a normal situation, Notre Dame should be fine at receiver with guys like Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas. They should be fine. No issues. And with Kane Barong at tight end. The problem, however, is at the receiver position. I don't feel this way about the tight end position. I think John McNulty is going to be able to get Kane Barong and Mitchell Evans.
I agree.
No doubt about that. But still, you're still relying on freshmen at a position where most freshmen don't play well, except when they're the freaky kind of guys like a Michael Mayer.
Michael Mayer, yeah.
But at receiver, they don't have a coach in place that has proven to me he can get those young, talented players ready to go. That's the problem, G.
Right.
And that's where I say, yeah, in theory, you're correct. If Brian Hartline was the receivers coach at Notre Dame, I'd say they're going to be fine. As long as they don't have like 2-3 more injuries. I mean, that gets absurd. I mean, you can't lose 5 guys from a position group in one season. But as long as they have more than one injury, they'll be okay, because Lorenzo and Deion can ball, and coach is going to get them ready to go. If Mike Denbrock was still here, I would, and Ryan Mahaffey, who was his GA, were still here, I'd say, yeah, I'll get them ready to go. They'll be okay. I'll get them ready to go. Because the few times we did see young receivers getting playing time and doing well at Notre Dame was under Mike Denbrock, not Dell Alexander.
I trust Mike Denbrock to do a lot of things. So
yes.
That's not really an issue at all.
Yeah. But Dell Alexander has never given me any sign that he's going to be able to coach those young guys up. So, again, we can't just say, hey, the talent's there. They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
We have to be able to be honest and I hope he proves me wrong, because they're going to need it, because those are talented players. And hopefully, you know what the dream situation is for me, Vince? Here's the dream scenario for me.
Okay. Because
these freshmen are now forced to be in the rotation, you have to play them, and they step up and ball. And you're like, hey, look, freshmen can play at Notre Dame at receiver. And they kind of make them change their mindset, or find a coach that can get those guys ready to go.
Right. Yeah.
Because in this era of kids can just leave like that, you have to do things to make kids happy. And that's twofold. Number one is obviously play them. But number two, the issue with Lawrence Key and some of these guys, it's not necessarily playing time. It's that you are not honest with them. They don't perceive you to have been honest with them. You told them one thing to keep them here and keep them happy, and then as soon as you get to the game week, it's completely different story. Kids aren't right. These are students at University of Notre Dame. They're smart, savvy kids, and I think sometimes these coaches think they can just give whatever
BS line,
coaching jargon they use, and think these kids are stupid. They're just going to buy it. This isn't Arizona State, right? This is University of Notre Dame.
Can I play devil's advocate here real quick?
Sure.
So your dream scenarios, they go out, they ball, et cetera, right? My worry that if that happens, that Brian Kelly is like, see, everything's great at wide receiver.
No, he's already going to think that, but it's gonna. What I'm going to say is it's going to make them realize that, hey, you know what, freshmen can play.
Okay.
Because Brian Kelly's always going to
you're
kind of have his head in the sand a little bit. So I get your devil's advocate point, but it's just if he still thinks that, but then still plays freshman, okay, fine. You got to take some good with the bad, right? Right now he thinks everything's fine, and he doesn't have a coach who can develop young players. That's the problem. So anyway. I
want to spin this to the defensive side real quick with the linebackers, because they've had 3 season-ending injuries from that position group, and that's devastating. I mean, it just is. And regardless of what you thought about Shane Simon, he was still a body. He was still a D1 linebacking body to help you out. And obviously Maris going down, so you got 2 guys at the same position, and Paul Mawala. While he was going to be a rotational player, he was still going to be a guy that they were going to count on.
Player,
yeah, absolutely. And so your depth is dead, at those 2 positions. And now, what is Marcus Freeman going to do as a position coach? I think that's a big question right now. Yes, they pulled Xavier Watts over from wide receiver. He's going to be at Rover. Jack Kaiser's going to learn multiple positions, it sounds like. Prince Collie is going to be probably a will now because he's second on the depth chart there after being there. Did you say Prince Collie was second on the depth chart at will?
Yes. Yeah, I just didn't hear who you said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he's second on the depth chart after being there for 3 days, which is interesting and very telling as to where they are right now. So I have a lot of faith in Marcus Freeman as a defensive coordinator. I'm interested to see what he's going to be like as a position coach, because he's dealing with a lot of crap right now as far as the depth chart is concerned.
I don't care how good of a coach you are, losing 3 players in your 2 deep, including your first and third players at one position for the season before your second game is that's a problem. And look, they've all been kind of freaky things. It's like sometimes you look and say, okay, well, you got these consistent shoulder injuries, and but a lot of these are just kind of, there's nothing you can do as a strength coach really guy's torn both of his Achilles in 2 seasons. That's a his body problem.
Yeah, right.
And it stinks for the kid. Shane Simon, labrums are just some of those things that happen in football, especially when you don't have good tackling technique. Maris Lufau got rolled up on. It's
unfortunate.
So
it's a football injury.
It's just bad luck.
Yeah,
it's just bad luck.
Right.
But still, it's why you should be recruiting good players every year, and why you don't. Well, they're going to be, and why you don't why you shouldn't as fans just every time they lose a guy spin it as like, oh, they'll be fine. They can lose. They're okay without Kendall Abdul-Rahman. He wasn't that good anyway. They're fine without Jordan Johnson. He was overrated anyway. Wow, Jay Brunell stunk anyway. Oh, okay. Well, now you don't have anybody left.
There's a lot I would give to have Jack Lamb back on this team.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
And look, and that was problematic too, because Jack had his own injury, issues at times, right? And he didn't play a ton in the opener at Colorado because he had a concussion, right? Well, we don't know if he'd have had a concussion in Notre Dame, but he's going to end up playing a lot. But still, he's been able to help you. And you just lost 3 guys from your special teams, your coverage team.
Absolutely, yeah, good call there. Didn't even think about special teams.
Yeah, and Osita Ekwan is out. I believe he's still out. So you can't move him back to linebacker.
Right.
Because I believe he's still out. He had some kind of foot injury or something, so he was in a boot throughout fall camp. So, yeah, it's an issue. We do have another super chat from Jay.
We do.
Jay says, thank you for the super chat, by the way, Jay. Do we see the return of Red-Faced Kelly if these problems continue throughout the year?
I think Brian Kelly has matured.
Not in games.
I think he's matured enough for game, during game situations where you're not necessarily going to see that. It was close with the roughing the kicker, but I don't blame him.
It won't be as players like it was
right
against South Florida which is when that all happened. And I still feel like that was overblown. That was such a disaster of a day. However many delay, I would have lost my mind too. It wasn't like we saw that every flipping game. It was and then he got super kind of. He didn't like that perception, and so he's changed.
And I get that, yeah.
But I would hope that maybe we're seeing Red-Faced Kelly in a couple of these staff meetings.
Yes,
that would be
I'd
nice
be okay with that, frankly.
To see.
I'd be okay with that because it's time to call some guys on the carpet.
I wouldn't mind seeing Tommy Reese have a couple red-faced moments with some of his position coaches either. But we'll see. And then this question here real quick from John DeCrisio. who determines who plays? The position coach, the coordinator, the head coach. Everybody has a role in
all
determines.
of the above.
Yeah. But how it goes in games is you decide what your rotation is going to look like during the week, and then it's up to the position coach to carry out that plan. I do know, I don't know, but I've been told that Tom Reese does allow his assistants to have a big role in it, as I think that's how it should be. I mean,
and I would be fine with that.
If you don't think a position coach capable of figuring out who should start at his position, then you need to find a new position coach.
Yeah, he shouldn't be there. Absolutely. You have to trust your coaches. You have to. I mean, and then if you're not, then you're going to get resentment from the coach, and it's not a good working relationship if you can tell that there's no trust there. Mm-hmm. So I have no problem with him, taking what the position coach has to say. No problem.
Yeah. This is a question I want to get to before we kind of move on, because we are going to break down the Toledo game and give predictions. But Justin McArthur says, and if all those receivers weren't very good and weren't going to contribute, then why recruit them in the first place? Well, I'll turn it a little bit. Who was responsible for recruiting a lot of those guys, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
It's frustrating.
And I think some the receivers that left, I think it was talent that walked out the door. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And for various reasons. I think Lawrence Keys is a starter. I think that Jay Brunell could have been a contributor. Maybe not this year, right? But moving forward, I think he could have absolutely been a rotational guy that you could count on in big situations, right? I think that Jordan Johnson, I think he could have been a contributor. So I mean, There's talent with these guys. They're just not here anymore. They at least
would have given you some depth where you felt like you would have had somebody to turn to if guys go down. Hopefully nobody goes down. Hopefully Kevin and Braden are able to stay healthy. Hopefully Avery can stay healthy. Joe can stay healthy. That's obviously the ideal situation. If those guys can stay healthy, they'll be fine. And then Jack Sullivan says, "Hey, IB Nation, do you know how long ago the Xavier Watts move was talked about?" They didn't start coming to him until the last week. When the injury started to pile up, like after Shane, and so like within the last several days, I should say, within the last several days,
right.
This was not something that had been planned for a period of time. This is in reaction to guys being injured. So it's not a move where like, we really think Xavier can help us there. It's more of like, we don't have anybody.
Yeah, they're going down the roster. They're like,
right. Exactly.
He's got to change his number. That's
yeah. Well, I mean,
you think
what number is he right now?
He's 2.
2?
Yeah, and that's DJ Brown.
Oh, yeah, he's got to change his number again. He's 21, 82, 2. Yeah,
right. That just stinks. I'm a numbers guy, so I like that kind of stuff. But
right.
Anyway.
Right.